welcome Chris Knapp here to present to the Lansing area software testers. And he's going to talk to us about accessibility, but not just accessibility and an experience report for accessibility within a company he's worked with. He's going to talk to us about the accessibility of testing processes, which when he told me what he was doing on this project he was working on, I was just super excited and asked him to come and present to the testers. And today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and so we're celebrating that by having Chris come and present to us and shine a light on some things he's learned about participating in an organization and helping to improve accessibility. So I'm ready to be here to take notes. If you do have any questions as we present along the way, feel free to throw them in chat, but we will have a couple of points where we will pause to either share those questions with Chris via the chat ones put in chat, or open this up for questions. So definitely feel free to ask questions about his experience. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to tap in to the experiences that Chris has had and can share some perspective on things. So Chris is the I don't know what you'd call it. Is it like principal, executive director, CEO, or whatever it is, all of the above, right? Of Accessiversity, a company that he has started, and he'll talk to us a little bit more about that. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Great. Well, thanks, Jess. And I just housekeeping purposes. First of all, my kids are both done with school for today, so hopefully we won't have any bandwidth issues with internet connections and stuff bugging out. So, but if for whatever reason I start to experience problems, I'll jump back in. So just bear with me if that happens. Hopefully it won't. And then I do have just Word document up in the background that I'm going to be referring to every so often. So if the JAWS screen reader starts bleeding through some of the audio with my headphones, hopefully that won't be too big of a disruption. So just wanted to kind of let people know that you might be hearing that kind of mumbling, low mumbling in the audio. So, but yeah, thanks again for this opportunity. I'm really super excited to present to the group today. Thanks, Jeff, for suggesting this. So when I was preparing my remarks for this presentation, I, put together my outline in the style of the experience report. So as I present, I'm going to follow the basic experience report format, more or less. And like Jess mentioned, we will stop every so often to ask questions. And then I think he's going to just kind of monitor those questions in the chat for me. So when we get to those breaks, we can cover some of those. And then, of course, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So to kind of set things up, in terms of the person or persons who are completing the work in the context of a real life organization. So the purpose of this talk is to highlight one of my ongoing projects, an immersive testing experience with the Sakai project, or the Sakai LMS. So last fall, as part of a long-term retainer contract with a company called Learning Experiences, I started doing accessibility testing and QA work for the Sakai project, which is an open source learning management system. So in terms of who I am, first of all, I should mention that I am statutorily blind. I suffered late onset blindness in my early 20s as a result of an autoimmune disorder that attacked the retinas of my eyes. So the recurrent bouts of vasculitis, numerous retinal detachments, and multiple different surgeries and procedures resulted with me having a prosthetic left eye and 8/200 vision in the lower periphery of my right eye. So for purposes of this discussion, basically what that means is that I don't see well enough to be able to drive or recognize people's faces or read text. So I rely on screen reader software and other assistive technology to do most everything that I do. In terms of like my professional experience, I've actually been a long time fixture here in the local IT scene, including starting as the inaugural executive director of the Capital Area IT Council since its inception in 2007 up until 2012, when I left to become the IT and Media Talent Director for the Workforce Development Agency at the state of Michigan. And then, of course, more recently, my work as an accessibility consultant and a QA tester through my company, Accessiversity. So in terms of practical rule, the practical goal of the work, the identification or analysis of existing problems, finding solutions, or implementing them in practice. So according to Chuck Severance, who's the chief architect of the Sakai project and the guy who owns Learning Experiences, the company that hired me to do this work, the goal of inviting me into the Sakai community and embed myself with the Sakai QA team was not just to improve the accessibility of the Sakai LMS product, but to fully assimilate me into the community, to start assessing every facet of the organization from top down to bottom up to inside out. And again, in the effort to make the entire Sakai community more accessible. So the business and social context of this work, like most open source projects, the Sakai LMS is maintained by a distributed community of developers, QA testers, and other practitioners, sourced from both the Sakai partner institutions, mostly colleges, universities, as well as some of the commercial affiliates, Learning Experiences, Longsight, and a few others. And this is also the case for the Sakai QA team, which is primarily made up of part-time testers, mostly students from some of the different partner institutions who rely on a series of online collaboration tools and weekly virtual stand-ups and check-ins, which are used to kind of monitor the progress of the group as well as to steer the work of the group. So, okay, before we move on, we can just pause here to see if there are any questions about any of the material that I've covered so far.
We don't have any questions yet in the chat, but could you help us understand a little bit more of with the Sakai LMS? I mean, what is the kind of user base for that? Is it for necessarily like colleges and universities, or is it for like open source type courses? Or talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's primarily used in education and primarily colleges, universities, higher ed, but it's actually can be used by any organization that's just looking for a tool to help kind of manage projects and workflow. It's set up as a tool for education. The primary users are instructors who are creating course content and then using the tools and features that are built in Sakai to help kind of manage online courses or hybrid courses. And then obviously students who are then logging on to complete coursework within Sakai. And then there are other users, admin users within the institution, so on and so forth. And so basically majority of our testing is focused on doing functional verification of ensuring that those tools and features are working for the different types of users.
Okay, and so when they brought you in, they hadn't previously, like, I guess, what was the state of accessibility? They hadn't had somebody like doing user experience type testing from an accessibility perspective in the past?
Very little. There was some, but it was mostly just kind of a skeleton type, a skeleton version of the accessibility test cases and things that they were focusing on, and really a limited number of any individuals with disabilities that had actually been involved in any of the testing. There was a couple of institutions that had some blind students and stuff that would mostly raise concerns. They weren't actively testing within Sakai. So we basically came in, which I'll get into here in the next
Okay.
couple of sections, and started to really just, build that from scratch for the most part. I mean, we took a little bit of, the things that they had identified as key areas that they wanted to focus on, different aspects of different tools and features that they wanted to ensure were good from an accessibility standpoint. But yeah, it was very little compared to where we are now.
All right. Sounds good. Well, please continue.
Cool. Okay, so moving on. So in terms of methods and theories used to achieve the practical goals of the project, so as I've already alluded to, our intent was for this to be an immersive testing experience. So I guess you could say that we were using the sink or swim method with the goal of becoming a productive member of the QA team as soon as possible. I jumped right in and got to work assessing the tools, systems, and processes being used by the Sakai QA team, starting with the onboarding document used to orient new testers to the Sakai LMS. So one of the things that I had to do as I was introduced to these new tools and processes was that either new or really modified approaches would need to be developed for folks like me who are blind or low vision users and rely on assistive technology to perform this work. So for example, I took the Google Sheets version of the test script that the other QA testers work off of, and I developed a comparable Excel-based regression test script. Since most blind, low vision users, myself included, are more comfortable working in Excel than in Google Docs. Plus, accessibility required, or accessibility testing required that the entire test script and all of the different use cases and everything would have to be rewritten with taking into consideration keyboard navigation and screen reader use and testing. So basically, we created an entire regression test script that mirrors the other regression test script, but was rewritten to account for those things: keyboard navigation and screen reader use. The other thing, there are several communication tools that are being used by the Sakai community that I had to figure out how to use with my assistive technology. So most of the community meetings are conducted on an open source web conferencing solution called Big Blue Button, which has some quirky features that took some getting used to with my assistive technology. Sakai also uses an open source web-based collaboration, real-time collaboration editor called Etherpad, which some of you may be familiar with. But unfortunately, Etherpad is almost completely inaccessible to JAWS users, which is my preferred screen reader that I use. So whenever I have to go into any of these meetings, what I found I had to do was to close out of JAWS, open up a different screen reader called NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access, and then open a separate web browsing session in Firefox so I could go into the Etherpad, sign in, check the agenda really quick, and then close out of Etherpad and Firefox and NVDA, and then open JAWS back up and go back over to the meeting that was being hosted over on Big Blue Button. So not ideal, and it's a temporary workaround that we hope we'll eventually be able to find a better solution that I won't have to continue to do that whole process to follow through with some of the online meetings. Some of the other tools like Slack, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with and probably use, and then Jira, which Sakai uses for submitting and tracking tickets. Those seem to be a little bit more accessible and user-friendly. Although like with Jira, they have a plugin called Unstoppable, which is supposed to make it more accessible for screen reader users. But the problem with a lot of these custom plugins is that they almost require you to learn this whole other set of kind of rules and processes for how to use them. A lot of them use different commands, shortcut commands and things. So that's been a little bit of a continual and slow learning curve there. And then the other thing that happened is that as I've been going through and doing my testing, another unintended consequence as I'm identifying all these, different processes and temporary workarounds is that I've been continuing to document everything that I'm doing. And so I've started to then kind of feed that into a new version of the QA onboarding document, or maybe an alternative version, which I've started to put together, which is a screen reader's guide to using or to the QA testing or Sakai QA testing process. So, so again, that kind of sets up kind of methods and approaches. So we can pause here again if anybody has any questions about any of that.
I had a quick question. This is Teresa Potts. So it sounds like there's some tool barriers for sure to just even kind of getting this process going. What would you say are some overall barriers for, and this could be a question at the end too, so you don't have to answer now if you answer it later in the program, but what are some of the barriers that you've seen as far as getting into the QA industry, altogether, having these different obstacles that you have to face on a regular basis?
Yeah, so I'm not trained as a technologist. I don't come from like a computer science, computer engineering, or developer background. But I've been working within different aspects of the IT industry for years, and so that personally has been one of my biggest kind of learning curves, is just the technical aspect of it. But to do the actual QA work, to just do functional verification, to follow test plans, that type of stuff, it's pretty straightforward. And that part of it has been pretty relatively easy to pick up. And then maybe where things get a little bit more complicated is that how we're then communicating with members of the development team, or folks that are involved with the UX or UI part of the system, and kind of that translator kind of interpreter kind of role. And then, yeah, the accessibility of the tools is probably the biggest barrier. And so that's kind of like what the first several months of this project have been really focused on, is just figuring out, well, okay, if this aspect of this tool isn't quite accessible for me as a screen reader user, what can I do differently to be able to, use it the way I need to use it and do what I need to do. So does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions or comments? Like Jira is a great example of that, Teresa. Like, are you guys familiar with Jira? Or are there folks on the call that use Jira? Or
yeah, use
everybody? Everybody? Okay.
Oh yeah.
So like up right now, like my kind of use of Jira has been kind of around the edges, kind of on the fringes of Jira. Like I get email notifications and things when I'm commented on, or in there's a comment that I was included on a different Jira ticket, and I can open up and look at, what the issue was, the description of the issue, see the test plan. I can log in and look through different filters and, kind of, seek out the information I need in terms of trying to understand why it is that I was included on a ticket and what it is that they're looking for me to do in terms of going and verifying something or what have you. But I'm still not at a point where like I'm just completely trust myself to go in and start creating Jira tickets and doing a bunch of like the deep dive stuff that folks that have been doing that for a long time or folks that don't have these other barriers need to think about, right? Because a lot of times when you're creating a Jira ticket or something, you might like do a screenshot or you might create a video or you might have to go in and look at that type of information to understand what it is that is going on with a particular issue. And so those are a few of the areas that we're still working through. And I say we because, we're figuring that out as a community. We're trying to figure out how do we, get to the end goal of making this something that works for everybody, including Chris. All right, so I move on then, Jess?
Sure.
Okay. So this next part, I'm just going to talk about some of the lessons learned and some of our conclusions so far at this point in the project. So early on, this immersive approach started to show promise. As you could expect, the more I worked in and the more I was able to familiarize with the Sakai LMS, the more I was able to assist or to assess the accessibility of its various tools and features. This doesn't mean that every issue was black and white, accessible or inaccessible. Oftentimes, I found that I could figure out some sort of a workaround to most every problem or problematic tool or feature, even if it wasn't optimal for my JAWS screen reader. And again, this is important for a couple of different reasons. So in terms of like this, gray area between functional verification and technical compliance, like when it comes to things like VPATs or voluntary product accessibility templates, or any other assessments for that matter, it's much better to say that a user is able to complete a task, even if that task isn't completely accessible or the process or approach that they had to use is less than ideal, than to say that something's completely inaccessible. The other thing is, again, I've alluded to, documenting all these different things that I'm doing. So during the course of my testing, as I've been making a habit of documenting everything, it's not only helpful for me when I have to go back and try to remember how I did a particular task, but I knew that I was also creating a test script and test plans that would become how-to guides for other blind or low vision testers who would be following behind me in my footsteps. The other thing in my note here to remind myself what this point is about is the good, the bad, and the ugly. The more I got to use Sakai and its various tools and features, the more I was able to provide feedback to the dev team about potential accessibility issues. But also those parts of Sakai that work well, sometimes suggesting that they model one part of the site after how a tool is being configured on another part of the site. Again, because Sakai is an open source product, you have a bunch of different people who have their fingers in that. And so you do, get some variation across how things are being developed across different tools and features and stuff. So that started to make a difference in terms of some consistency in terms of like accessibility practices and like if we're gonna include a collapsible section here, or we should configure our radio buttons in this way, so that it's going to work for the screen reader users. And so we can look to parts of the site where those types of things are working well, and then feed that information to the dev team and others who are involved with UX or UI or other parts of the product. And so, and again, that's where kind of part of my role has morphed into that as kind of a translator or interpreter. So another kind of more recent development that has occurred just in the last couple of months is I've started setting up these interactive test sessions with the person who oversees the JIRA ticketing and triage process. So I originally pitched this as a kind of pre-triage JIRA meeting. And so this is a meeting we do every Thursday afternoon over through an interactive test session over Zoom. And I can kind of go through and talk about some of the different problems that I've run into over the course of testing for that week. And what's great about this is because we're using screen share function or feature in Zoom, and I can pipe through the computer audio so that he can hear my JAWS screen reader and see as I'm navigating around the website. I can go to a specific element, I can recreate the problem. He can see that happening in real time, and then provide feedback as to kind of what he thinks might be going on, or just help me to better understand how to document that in terms of maybe escalating that as an issue. And so, and it's been great for me because I'm learning from an experienced Sakai user who can kind of help fill in the blanks for me. And then also it's a great opportunity for him to really get a feel for what it's like to navigate the Sakai system with assistive technology. And then, that he can then incorporate that into his thinking as, he's going and thinking about designs or redesigns of different parts of the system. So another cool development is a project it's a partnership with an organization called VisionAid. VisionAid, whose US headquarters are in Boston, Massachusetts, is an Indian-based organization that provides IT-related training to blind individuals in India. And so Dr. Chuck, his company, Learning Experiences, and VisionAid started a pilot project in January that I've been overseeing. And I've been actually working with a couple of blind testers at one of the VisionAid facilities in India. And they've been actually going through and using the Excel-based version of the test script that I developed to do their own round of testing on the Sakai tools and features. And this is important for a couple of different reasons. One, this just further validates that this approach that I developed is going to work for blind and low vision testers who are going to be following behind in my footsteps. And then also, we're able to then have them do testing using different various combinations of screen readers and web browsers. So we're just getting additional coverage and painting like a broader picture as to, what's going on in terms of the accessibility of the different tools and features. So, so that's been kind of cool. I think we're up to right now, we're in the process of 5 different combinations of screen readers and web browsers that we're testing on currently. And so kind of the third and final thing that I'll mention that has started to happen is that other members of the Sakai community have started to become more proactive when it comes to approaching me about potential accessibility issues. This is maybe the most telling sign that we've succeeded with our goal of me becoming a fully contributing member of the Sakai community, because others within the community are recognizing me as a subject matter expert and a valued member of the team, and maybe more importantly, an integral part of the development life cycle. So that kind of ends up this part, and I have some different key takeaways and stuff that I can come back to, but I guess I'll just kind of stop there and we can kind of open it up for Q&A, if that sounds good, Jess.
Sure. Any questions that anybody wants to share right now for Chris? I'm keeping quiet while there's an opportunity for people to think. Yeah, maybe getting into a few of the takeaways, Chris, would be good. And if people have questions following that, we can circle back.
Sure. Yeah. So, and Jess and I kind of talked about this when we were putting together an outline and kind of following this experience report. And, I told him, one of the things that I like to try to do when I do a presentation like this or do a talk like this is, to have folks kind of walk away with some like actionable next steps in terms of like how to either start or to expand or improve upon any accessibility testing or accessibility related strategies that they're engaging in. And so, and some of you, I imagine you probably do some of these things, but one thing is you can download like free versions of a screen reader like NVDA, and actually, while you're doing your testing, you can, switch on a screen reader to check that things are working properly. Or if you guys are developing, obviously, in a Mac environment, Mac has a number of built-in accessibility features, including voiceover that you can switch on. You can employ the use of automated test tools. But really being a proponent, of course, of live manual testing, I'm always going to recommend that you try to include actual individuals with disabilities in the testing process, just because no matter the best developer, QA person, UX person, um, a sighted individual is just not going to be able to 100% fully replicate what that user experience is. And even when we do our assessments, that's something that we found is that because we'll focus on the technical requirements and look for all those WCAG issues or ADA or Section 508, all that stuff. But as we get in and are doing our testing, a lot of times what we find is that there's an issue that we've uncovered that maybe wouldn't get flagged as technically get flagged as an accessibility issue, but it's a usability issue in terms of if you make these improvements, it's going to just make that more usable for everyone, including folks who are using assistive technology. So yeah, those are just a few of my takeaways. And I guess I'll also say that accessibility sometimes it can be scary. Folks, organizations, they don't know where to start or they don't know what they're getting themselves into. And I'd say don't overthink it. That you can start small. You can just focus on a couple, 2 or 3 or 4, just what you consider the most important use cases for your product or service, and just start there and say, we're going to evaluate this, these 1 or 2 or 3 use cases from an accessibility perspective, and build off of that. I think the important thing is to just start somewhere. What are other folks that are on the call like? Does anybody want to offer up what they're doing right now in terms of any accessibility testing or assessments? And if you're not, just saying you're not doing anything is fine too.
Teresa Potts again. I was going to say, in the past, I think as far as we went in the past was was typically that we had a few members of the team that were colorblind. And so when we were picking colors, we wanted to make sure that they were able to, to see the colors and be able to read all the text. And
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't anything like official that we
No.
did. Just, utilizing, what our team members, condition consisted of, and, everybody's colorblindness is different too. So, even
Yeah.
that was interesting too, having two different team members look at our websites.
Yeah. No, and that's really important. And we're going through right now, there's um, a feature within Sakai that's right now just in the developmental phase, but they just launched dark mode. And so we're having to go through, and there's been a couple of things that popped up from accessibility perspective about how some of the color palettes used within the dark mode have to be thought through, like because everything's kind of more muted, especially when you're trying to um, combine like several colors within a feature. And so we're talking about outlining like certain elements in white and stuff to help them kind of stand out for folks who maybe are dealing with color blindness or can't really discern between colors that are in kind of those complementary palettes. And I'll mention this too, because this is something important that I probably should have said earlier, is that obviously because the web and um, digital content and stuff is a visual medium. A lot of the stuff that you need to look at from accessibility perspective just by default is visual. So that's where starting with thinking about how like a screen reader user is going to interact with the system, that's going to cover a lot of the things that you need to focus on. But as you guys know, and as Teresa's pointed out, that's not the only disability that's out there. There's a lot of different things you have to think about. If you think about audio or visual or video content that you put up on your site, you need to ensure that it has captioning or a transcript for folks who might be deaf or hard of hearing. You got to avoid using flashing and strobing because there's people with different neurologic disorders that might actually cause them to have seizures. There's even just how you what wording you use for folks who have different learning disabilities. So there's a wide range of things that go into accessibility and thinking about your strategy. So, but thank you for that, Teresa.
No problem. I had another question if I can jump in too again.
Yeah.
Working in tech, obviously lends itself to working in teams pretty heavily. And as teammates, what's some things that teammates can do that are extremely helpful for you and your day to day, and then what are some things that people have tried to do, trying to be helpful, that were not so helpful in the end?
Yeah. So I work, and again, because my assessment or this work with Sakai goes just beyond the testing on the QA team. Like I'm evaluating all facets of the organization and stuff. So I attend a number of different meetings throughout the course of the week, and help out in several different areas. And so for the most part, everyone's been super helpful. I've just been really fortunate that I'm part of just a welcoming group of folks who are will be really proactive in kind of thinking about is this something that Chris is going to be able to do, or you know uh, or not be able to do. But I think the thing that they do that's really helpful is that they'll either be proactive and they'll ask me before it's an issue, or they'll just ask the question. Sometimes that's important, is just say, hey, I don't know about this, but we're thinking of doing XYZ, and do you think that this is going to work for you? And so that's always been super helpful. In terms of things that aren't helpful, I it's I don't know if there are any good examples I can think of right off the top of my head, other than just maybe everyone kind of in your guys' world, I think, is just expecting information kind of at their fingertips and things to happen like super fast. And so there's a lot of times when we'll be discussing an issue or something, and just URLs or things are being just shared through like a chat in a video or a web conferencing kind of meeting, and just trying to keep up with everybody. Sometimes that can be a little difficult because Jaws is just like reading that all out in real time as everybody's discussing the topic, and then I'm trying to like go into the chat, get the URL, open it up, if it's like a Jira ticket, going into Jira to try to figure out like what is it that everybody's talking about. And so that's one of those things that you know it's just and it's not really that it's not that people aren't being helpful or whatever. It's just you know I think that's just going to be one of those things that's going to be difficult to fully overcome. I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I was gonna say probably one way that I've experienced some of this a little bit is just with hands-free driving and some of the
Yeah.
built-in tools. And it'll read your text message and somebody will send me a meme or something,
Yep.
and it'll just say the actual title of the picture itself, .jpeg or something. Or I'm like, okay, that doesn't describe anything. I don't know what this is. I had to wait till I stop, or I get a URL to something, article or something like that. And it's reading everything, and
Yep.
that can definitely be it can slow things down. I can say, for just from experience myself.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because in some ways a lot of that stuff's getting better because they're using AI more to create alt text and things, automatically generate alt text and things on a lot of those different platforms. But the other big one is virtual assistants. So like all of you probably have like an Alexa or a Google Home Mini or whatever, and so in a lot of ways, you guys, it's kind of like welcome to my world. It's like we've been, that's what I've been kind of dealing with for 25, 30 years now, ever since I've had all the issues with my eyesight happen, and using like JAWS, or just trying to communicate something back to the virtual assistant, and getting frustrated when they're like not doing what you're trying to do, and you have to like try to figure out a way to get it to work the way you want it to work. And so that's like a big part of assistive technology in general.
Yeah, no doubt. There's definitely times where I've tried to tell my car to play a certain artist, and depending on how long the artist's last name is and its origin as far as language, sometimes it will totally find it, sometimes it will not find it at all, and I'm like, that is not who I requested. But I have seen that there's been times where it surprised me. So like the artist Kesha, before, I think she took the $ out of her name. She had the $S in the middle, and so it was pronounced Kesha. She took that out, but when she did have that the dollar symbol in her name, it actually found her really easy. I was like, wow, that's something. But then there's other names, it's just not even close.
Yeah. So I have another one an example I can bring up, but are there other questions that I can get to first, and I can come back to what I was going to say?
I don't have any others, but I know I've been asking a lot. So if anybody else has any.
Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll re-ask.
Yeah, so one that's kind of come up more recently is that as I'm kind of thinking more long term, and as you know, I'm getting more involved kind of at the JIRA level with issues. You know, there'll be a lot of communications back and forth between, you know, different you know, folks, either you know, people at the partner institutions who are part of testing for a particular school, and then the dev team and UX folks, UI folks, what have you. But you know, if the ultimate goal is to just even move beyond testing and get to where I'm kind of getting in under the hood and able to, you know, start to talk about improving, you know, some of the HTML and you know, the actual like underlining code, which I don't know how much of that I'll do, but just, you know, thinking that that's kind of the direction that things are kind of trending, is that one thing that's come up recently, it's kind of interesting, is that I kept like picking up on these different ARIA labels being, you know, that were included in like a JIRA ticket. And there's a bunch of different labels that, and you guys probably know this, that use compound words. Like the one that like kind of got this all going in the first place was the ARIA label described by. But typically you're doing all of that, you're using a lowercase naming convention. And the problem is that when you're listening to that with the screen reader, it just becomes like a jumbled like bunch of gobbledygook. And like you know, it's like you're doing the double take, like what did it just say, like. And so I started going through and I found like a list of a bunch of these labels that have the compound word kind of structure. And you know, with like hashtags and stuff, if you use camel case where you capitalized every word within that that label, then the screen reader will actually pronounce it as separate words, like with this, you know, as if you were putting a space in between the words. And so I just started asking the question to people within Sakai, like, hey, is there a way that we could change this so that whenever any of these labels appear, that we use camel case? And you know, this is kind of, we just started having this conversation, but I mean, this is like something that looks like it's a convention that was adopted, you know, as far back as like the folks that were putting together the whole web accessibility initiative stuff. And so I don't know where, you know, where it'll end up going, but that's just, that was another one of those just like kind of eye opener type moments where it's just like, how did this thing get this far that like we have something that you know, isn't accessible? Like there have to be blind, low vision people who have, you know, actually been involved with developing or, you know, coding systems. And so, and I don't know what they're doing to overcome that, but it's like super annoying to me. So I have to imagine that they found some sort of like a workaround there. But does that make sense to you guys? Do you guys?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, thanks for that. I did want to do a quick time check. We are a couple minutes here away from 1, and I want to make sure people have opportunity to get to their next meeting. So any closing remarks there, Chris, that you have for us?
I don't have any, but I, again, just appreciate the opportunity. I hope you guys found this interesting and informative, and you at least walked away with something that you'll be able to apply.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I took some notes, so I appreciate you taking the time. And like is just to kind of call out one of the things that you had mentioned, Chris. NVDA is a there's, you can do a free download of that, and that's a pretty good screen reader. I think it's pretty close to the adoption rate of JAWS at this point, from when I last checked. So
yeah,
it's a good option.
And JAWS itself, if you go to the Freedom Scientific website, you can download JAWS and run it in a 40-minute demo mode. So you can also test, you know, in short kind of a short burst with JAWS as well. So
yeah, and I know I've used Microsoft's Narrator like before I moved on to some other tools, and
yep.
that's just included with Microsoft related things. I don't think it's quite as good as some of the other tools, but it gives you
yeah.
an entry level, right?
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of it now, it's starting to get where this stuff is built in, which is great. I use JAWS because it's like kind of my native screen reader. It's what I've used ever since all the stuff happened. And so it's like the thing I'm comfortable with.
Right.
And it is still kind of the industry leader. If you looked out and pulled like, folks working in industry, I think those numbers would be considerably higher. Whereas NVDA still has a pretty decent adoption rate, but I think it's something that a lot of students and just folks that aren't necessarily using it for work purposes are maybe using NVDA because it's a free alternative.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's helpful information for those of us that are doing some testing. But we are at time here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I'd like to say I appreciate everybody coming out today and sharing some questions with Chris and hearing what he had to share related to accessibility. Please check him out at Accessiversity. Is it accessiversity.com? Is that your website?
It's actually through knappstrategic.com is
okay.
My consulting business. And so we have an Accessiversity page. So it's just knappstrategic.com/accessiversity. And then if you do -blog at the end of that, that'll take you to our Tales of the Reluctant Blind blog. And so we're putting out a lot of good content that might be of interest to you guys. We are going to be doing a recap of the presentation today here. So we'll be posting that to the blog at some point today, hopefully.
Sounds good. Well, we appreciate you coming and sharing with us. And with that said, feel free to make your way to your afternoon meetings.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.